As newer, bigger, and better games come out, they require a lot more system resources. So we have to update our systems. In this video, we're going to go over a 7900 GRE upgrade, upgrading our current $700 budget system to this bad boy. This one is going to be a little different than most of my upgrade videos. There's going to be some pitfalls as well. So without wasting any more time, let's get to the unboxing and then we'll get to the upgrade. Don't worry, there's chapters. If you don't like the unboxing, you can skip ahead. So let's keep going. I had to zoom out a little bit because the box is tremendous. It's from our friends at XFX, the 7900 GRE. To be more specific, it's the Speedster MERC310, and again, the AMD Radeon RX 7900 GRE. See that right along here. Nothing on this side or on this side. Then down here, we have some of the specifications and everything. And along the bottom, some of that, 16 gigs. And then serial number, UPC, and all that good stuff. So thankfully, easy on the outside. So let's go ahead, just slice it open. All right, so a nice presentation for the installation guide, which we'll go over in this video. Latest drivers and everything, scan the QR codes, multi-language, warranty information, and all that good stuff here. Nothing much on the back, and some good foam. I like the simplistic look of everything here. Looks very nice. I'm going to just take this out and set it off to the side for 1 sec. See if there's anything else inside this box. It's cool to save this box, but it's a whole lot of nothing in there. All right, so and then this extra piece of foam. Taking that off, there is the additional layer here covering the card from dust, dirt, and scratches. Unfortunately, it was not a romantic peel. And then the top. The card is about 13.2 inches long and 5 inches deep, and about 2 inches thick. So she's a sexy looking card. It is plain and simple. We don't need to be complicated. It's going to be inside of our system. All right, so then we have 3 nice size fans, about 99.36 millimeters. And then the middle one, so that's these two out here, is about 89.19 millimeters. And we can see at the very end over here, XFX, Radeon, the nice heatsink over here, really long, almost covering the entire card. 2 8-pin PCIe connections. Yes, you need both. And the card, or at least the system with this card inside, at a minimum requires a 700 watt power supply. Then along the back over here, feels like a metal backplate with their opened up over here backplate with the heatsink, and so that the fans can blow through it. We can see here 3 heat pipes, or at least actually 1, 2, 3, 4 heat pipes, if you could see that there. So very nice looking. Along the bottom, more of that heatsink, and then the cable over here from the PCB to the fans. And make sure, of course, to remove this, protecting the PCIe fingers down here. Then back here, it has 3 2.1 display ports and 1 2.1 HDMI port. And then we can see right along here that little grill where heat is going to expel with the XFX logo. And then right over here, that little switch so that you can change in between different firmware versions on the card. So let's go ahead and install this in a machine real quick. So now at this part of the video, we're going to go over downloading all the drivers and prepping everything before we install the card. So the current card requires 1 PCIe 8-pin cable. The 7900 GRE is going to require 2. This will only provide up to 150 watts, mind you, when it's fully utilized and everything. The card is stated to pull about 260 watts. Now, the PCIe slot will provide 75 watts of power, And that alone won't get us to what we need, so we will need that second PCIe 8-pin. I didn't think ahead and actually plug it into the power supply, so we're going to go over that in a second as well. But let's first go here to Edge or whatever browser you may use, and I'm gonna check real quick tech specs and the requirements. So 700 watts, so that's important to remember. So 700 watts, and again, 2 PCIe 8-pin connections. This is the specifications for this specific card. Closing out of here, we'll go to AMD.com and resources, then we'll go to drivers. And then I'm actually going to start off with the chipset. So why chipset? Well, chipset, everything resides on the motherboard, which is controlled by the chipset. So every so often they come out with a bunch of updates for the chipset drivers, and a lot of times we forget to upgrade them. So since we're updating the graphics card, the graphics drivers, we might as well do the chipset as well. And I'm using the B550 chipset, which is an AM4 chipset. B550 here, and I'll click submit, and then we'll download the latest and greatest here. Then I'll come back up here, resources and support, drivers. Then I'll come here to graphics. I'll select AMD Radeon RX, RX 7000 series, and finally 7900 GRE, and click submit. Then we'll go to Windows 11 or whatever version of Windows you have. I don't recommend downloading the auto detect and install. I recommend downloading the latest Waco driver. So I'll click download. Then over here, we'll go to wagnardsoft.com and we'll download the latest and greatest version of DDU. Come over here, scroll down a bit, and then click here for download and support. Display driver uninstaller, the release version, and then you can either download the portable self-extracting or the installer. Let's go for the self-extracting. And then I'll go ahead and open DDU, and I'll create a folder on the root called DDU. A lot of people flip out on this one. Why do I have to do DDU? Takes a few extra seconds, and it makes sure that you have the latest and greatest driver when you install the latest and greatest driver, and there isn't any residual driver laying around. When you've used your computer for quite some time and you've updated drivers, you have a driver on top of a driver on top of a driver on top of a driver, it creates a very unstable foundation. So you just spent a few $100s on your graphics card. Make sure it runs properly. I recommend using DDU. Then we'll right click on the start button, shut down our sign out. We'll hold the left shift key, and then we'll click restart. Now under choose an option, we can let go of the left shift key. That's after it restarts. And then we'll go down to troubleshoot, advanced options, startup settings, and restart to change Windows options such as, and click restart. And then we'll boot into here. Here allows us to select what version of safe mode we want to boot into. I'm just going to select the regular safe mode, which is option number 4, and I'll press 4 on the keyboard. And now we'll reboot and then boot into safe mode. In safe mode, you'll notice we're in safe mode because all 4 sides say safe mode, all 4 corners. File Explorer, and we'll go into this PC and the C drive, and we'll go into that directory that we extracted DDU into. Then we'll click on Display Driver Uninstaller. Seems to be the first time, because it is, and we'll click OK here. I have to resize this because it always goes outside of the screen. But here, we don't have anything NVIDIA. Our motherboard isn't an NVIDIA chipset. That's quite some time ago. And we don't have an NVIDIA graphics card. We'll select here because why not? Let's remove everything NVIDIA. But because we do have an AMD chipset, we'll remove everything here. We don't want it to affect the chipset driver, even though we're installing over those. We'll go ahead and uninstall that here again because we have an AMD CPU and an AMD chipset. This will still remove the AMD graphics drivers. And we'll scroll down. We can leave this checked, and we want to place a check. This is very important under advanced options. Prevent downloads of drivers from Windows updates when Windows search for a driver for a device. Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we'll click a check there. It's important. And then we'll click OK here and close. Here is the other important part. Under the first prompt over here, we'll select GPU. And then it's detected that we have an AMD GPU, but just in case, under here you have the options for NVIDIA. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you'll select NVIDIA. You can select AMD, which we're getting rid of an AMD card here to install an AMD card. So we're removing the AMD driver. Or Intel, if we had an Intel graphics card, we're removing Intel. But we're only removing AMD here. And then we'll select clean and shutdown because once we're done here, the machine shuts off and we can remove the card. This only takes a few seconds. So now that the system is off, we're going to go ahead and unplug the system. We're going to remove the graphics card, update the power supply with an additional PCIe connection, and then install the 7900 GRE. Since we are removing the graphics card, we'll go ahead and just disconnect the HDMI port and disconnect all of it. Real quick before we get started, before you touch anything inside the system, touch the metal portions of the case to get all that ESD out of your hands. That way you don't fry the card. If you step away for a minute and come back, make sure to ground yourself again. First things first, we'll go ahead and remove the PCIe cable from the card. To remove the PCIe cable, we're going to need to push on this little retention mechanism right over here, which releases it from the card. And now we just pulled that out. And now we'll go ahead and unscrew right over here to release the card. Now that that's removed, at the end of the PCIe slot, there's a little piece right over here that locks the card in place. So as much as we pull the card out, this is locked in place into the card. So to remove that, we'll go ahead and push this down. You notice the card will come out a little tiny bit. Okay. Came out a little tiny bit. Now we can just pull on the card and we remove the graphics card. Now we have space to install the XFX, but we're going to need to attach the secondary 8-pin PCIe cable to the power supply. So along the bottom of this particular case, here we'll find the power supply. On the side over here, this is where all the cables are hidden, and there's very little chance that we can actually find exactly where we need to plug that into. So we are going to need to remove that power supply, but because of the way this case is, we can just unscrew it here and slide it out and easily pop in that cable. And by the way, that cable came with the power supply, and I kept all of the additional cables right in the box. And we'll get to this in one second. Okay, so now just moving this cable, we should be able to gently slide the power supply out. And just be careful how you do this because you don't want to pull on the wrong cable. So we're going to turn it around over here. Here we can see all the additionals. We can see PCIe CPU. Then PCIe CPU right up here as well. So in the power supply box, with all the other garbage from the build, I like to keep everything in the same box if I can. Here we'll find that additional PCIe cable. Okay, so this is the part that goes connected to the power supply, and this is the part that goes to the card. Notice this does have two, but we don't want to use both because you're splitting up power when the power supply may not be able to provide adequate power from just one strand. All right, so again, grabbing this part, we'll simply plug it in right over here to PCIe CPU, and that little retention mechanism is right at the top. So we'll see that hole right down here. Then we'll plug that in. So now we're going to have to put the power supply back in the case. Just be careful that you don't pull on any cables incorrectly. All right, I feel a little afraid on how easy that was to pop back in, but regardless, just line up the screw holes over here like you did when you first built it. And now that that's back together, we push the initial cable through a grommet right through there again. It's always getting that second PCIe section of the cable through that is a bit of a pain. All right, finally got that through. All right, so just to see if we have enough clearance, we can see the card is small enough that it still fits in the case. We have about 3 inches of space between the card and the front of the case. Now, the PCIe fingers over here and these metal pieces right over here, it's important that we pay attention to where these all go. So when we slide the card in, the first thing that's going to make contact before the PCIe fingers is this over here. Now you need to be careful with the way you install it. It's hard to see it back here, but there are two openings right over here between the motherboard and the case that we can see along the back of the case. Coming over here, we can see them right here, that these two metal pieces are going to slide into. So you need to be careful when you install the card, that when you push it in like this, you don't have those pieces of metal sticking out, or else you're not going to be able to install the card properly. The way you're going to want to do that is between the case and the motherboard. You'll slide it like this, and now this goes into the case instead of out of the case. And now before we put the card back in, you're going to want to make sure that the PCIe slot is open. This is that little lock that we unlocked to get the card out. If it's locked, just push it like this so that it opens up. When it's locked, it'll be like this. So just go ahead, open it up. And this little piece of the card here, that makes that little piece lock into place. So we'll slide it right into here. We'll slide those PCIe gold fingers into the slot. Okay, and now that that's in place, you'll notice that little PCIe locking mechanism click up once the card's fully inserted. Now we'll go ahead and push the card in and just watch that little PCIe piece. And it clicked right into place, and that locked. And now before we actually pop that PCIe connection in place, we'll go ahead and screw the card in. So if you remember on the previous card, we had the PCIe connection like this, but the clip here is at the very top. So we need to turn this around so that the clip is on the top, and then we can slide it right into place there. And let me show you at a different angle. All right, so we'll push that right into there. And again, just watch this pop up and you'll hear it click in place. All right, it was a teeny tiny click, but that still clicked right in place. Now I need to clean up some of this cabling, so give me 1 second. All right, so I cleaned up the clutter back over here, and the cabling up front is passable. Not the best, but it works. Actually, it looks like I'm going to need a sag bracket. 1 second. So after verifying that I am on a flat surface here, we can see that my little level over here is off. So from our friends at, I have the link down below. I'll go ahead and install this bracket. You can make it look as pretty or as ugly as you like. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and plug it in real quick. Now that everything is back together, we'll go ahead and plug everything back in. The main thing you need to worry about is, in case you came from onboard video where you would have plugged in your graphics card right over here or your HDMI cable, now you're going to plug it right into the card itself, either off of one of the HDMIs or 3 of the DP cables. We're going off of the capture card here, so it's going to be the same process. So let's go ahead and plug in everything else as it was before. Turning on the system for the first time. Forgot to flick the switch in the back for the power supply. All right, so everything looks good. Now let's go ahead and install the graphics drivers. So we'll come under File Explorer, under Downloads, and actually let's install the chipset first. So the graphics may turn off for a second. So then we'll go ahead and install all of this. So 1 sec. All right, that was easy. And you'll notice it says restart. Whenever a driver asks you to restart, it's always incredibly important to restart. So, but actually let's go ahead and click close and let's manually restart. So right click on the start button, shut down or sign out and restart. Okay, now that we're back in Windows, we'll go back into File Explorer, back into Downloads, and let's go ahead and install the graphics drivers. As we're recording, the graphics may drop off for a split second and HDCP might enable, which will block me recording. I need to disable it and I'll show you how to do that as well. Then we'll double click here on the graphics drivers. And we'll go under additional options, factory reset, because we can, and that's going to do almost the same thing as DDU, but I want to do that just to be certain. And I click install. So 1 second. All right, and I guess because it already saw that I had done DDU, there was nothing to remove. It didn't make me, so I go ahead and uncheck this, and I'll click finish here. Adrenaline software is going to open up, so I'll click skip this here. And the way I would have enabled or disabled HDCP is I'll click here at the very top under the search, HDCP, click HDCP support, display settings, scroll down a tiny bit, display overrides, read and accept the EULA. I accept and just disable here. So 1 second, I'm gonna disable it and I'll be right back because it asks you to restart as well. And once we're back in Windows, we'll right click on the background and we'll select show more options and AMD Software Adrenaline Edition. All right, so Adrenaline Edition is awesome. It allows you to utilize Hyper RX, which is a portion of FSR. It allows you to get more frames out of your card, double sometimes, than your card can produce. Upsampling 1080p to 2560 by 1440 or something along those lines. With this card, chances are we won't need to use it much, but the option is there and that's great. And that's just one way to get to it here. So then we'll go under gaming. Here it sees a lot of the games that we already have installed. And I'm going to compare these games to the 6500 XT so that you can see what an upgrade like this does for you. Graphics. This allows you to also see all those presets as well. Hyper RX, Quality, Hyper RX Eco, and Default. And then all the different features that the drivers allows you. RSR, AFMF, which is incredibly awesome and also works with FSR. And all this good stuff over here. Definitely make sure you have wait for vertical refresh disabled. That's how I take care of it. And we'll come under display. Some additional display options. This particular monitor does support AMD FreeSync, but because I'm going through a capture card, it's disabled. Virtual super resolution, all those options over here. And then advisor, we can record and stream now because we do have AVX1 encode and decode as well as H.264 and 265 encode and decode, whereas the 6500 didn't. We'll skip this for now, but here we can start recording. Then here we can record a live stream. Scene editor, media player here, and then settings for everything under here, and then performance, some tracking, and an overlay, which I use often. It's great. This is just to analyze all that. And then over here, this is where we actually do all the overclocking, the tweaking and tuning, at least the basics. And we can have a fan curve as well. Then under settings, some more metrics over here, and smart technology where we can enable different types of newer AMD technologies like noise suppression, privacy view, smart access video, and smart access memory. And then the little gear over here gives us the back end to all of that as well. Here it does the checks for you and everything. And some of the audio and video settings here. Hotkeys, relive or relive VR, and some preferences here. Now, aside from all of this, which is incredibly important to get the most out of your card, one thing that we can't do through here, I'll close out of this. I'll right click on the desktop and I'll go to display settings. I'll scroll down, then I'll go to advanced display. Under advanced display, we'll find choose a refresh rate. My particular monitor does 120 Hertz, but because I'm going through a capture card, I can only do 60 Hertz. Changing it from 59 to 120, 140, 160, 360, whatever your maximum refresh rate is on your monitor, changing it from what I have to what you have, you're going to notice a tremendous performance improvement. Everything is going to feel so much more smooth, so much more free. Along with FreeSync, it's going to be a tremendous experience. But let's keep going. So then after we enable that, we'll select keep change, again, your highest refresh rate, and then you'll be at that higher refresh rate. You can see that right over here. But again, I'm using a capture card, so the AVT GC513. So that's why it's only 60. So with the XFX Speedster MERC310, we just went from start to finish, upgrading an older PC with an older graphics card to a brand new graphics card. But we went over the specifications first. That way we knew exactly what we were getting into so that we can prep. Then we removed all the old drivers, installed the new card, installed the new drivers, both chipset and GPU, and got you ready optimizing the system for your next game. The next video coming up, we're going to do some gameplay on it as well so that we can see the performance this card is going to get you. We took a few extra steps that we haven't taken in other videos, so I hope that helped you. Now, if you want to see what we're going to be doing in that next video, to give you an example, check out this video up above. Iggy with This Bytes for you up. See you guys.